Buenas tardes y muchísimas gracias por venir.
Good evening and welcome to this talk with Mr. Ellroy. I guess you know him very well. We're going to talk about his new book, This Storm, and it's part of the second quarter of LA books. City that is all over his work. James Ellroy, I think, goes without saying his introduction. We all know about LA Confidential, the Black Dahlia, and he is part of the crime books and black novels in nowadays. So he created his very personal style with very short paragraph, very short lines, and with characters with little psychology that define themselves as they perform. And violence, it's always in crime books, but here it is expressed in a brutal way. Police corruption, well, all these subjects that are tackled now and then in his work. In this particular case, the case of This Storm, this is located or settled in LA in the beginning of January 1942. I think we have to sort of give you the framework for the book, that is the beginning of it. This is the Japanese army sort of just bombed Pearl Harbor. I'm not translating that, am I?
There's no translation in my ear.
No, you have to put the phones down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, hello, are you with me now? Okay, he's been saying very nice things about you, so it's okay. So he's saying that the beginning of the book is in 1942, beginning of the shelling of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese army. And the book starts precisely in the beginning of 1942 in LA. And there is a plot where the police, LA police is involved, and also the Japanese that live in the States and that are suffering retaliation. And also in the book you talk about the Chinese mafia, and also we see Mexico in the book appear. This is close to Baja California. And in all his books, but especially I think in this one, history plays a very important role in this book. To start with, I'd like to remind you that in the beginning and then later in the book, we even see Franco and the Falange and the bombing of Guernica. Can you tell us why?
Okay, nothing's coming through my headset. Yeah. So somebody should get up here and fix the headset. Okay? There. No, nothing.
No, lo oyes.
Can you hear me now? No? Can you now hear me? No? Hello? Hello? I'm just saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hello? Okay, okay. So he's saying why we see Franco and the Falange.
¿Por qué aparece?
I'm not hearing a thing.
No?
No. Brother.
Okay.
Hola? Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Okay, okay. So he's asking why Franco is in the book and also the Falange, and then even why is Franco in the book? Why is Franco in the book? Why do you mention Franco in the book? Hello? Take those ones.
Right. Okay, now let's see.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Channel 2? Hello? Oh, hello? 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can you hear the translation? Yes. Okay. Okay, his point is, why do you mention Franco, Anti-Falange, and the bombing of Guernica in your book?
The Falange
and the bombings over Guernica.
The Condor Legion, the horrible shit that happened during the Spanish Civil War. It's because this is a book about the amalgam of whacked out fascistas y comunistas in Mexico and the United States in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and about the fascista conversion of a very sinister policeman who appears in a total of 5 of my massive, great historical crime novels. And we both know who he is, but I don't want to give it off for anybody who hasn't read these books. Mm-hmm. You're telling a very complex story. Mm-hmm. You got 2 choices here. You can layer in densely historical detail, and people will go, oh, Franco, the Republicans, the fascists, the late 1930s, the Falange. And people contextually will figure out within the overall context what it means, or you can jerk off and describe a palm tree. Mm-hmm. You've got 2 paragraphs. Make it
Así que has elegido la segunda opción.
So you went for the second choice, didn't you?
Yeah.
Sí. Luego hablaremos un poquito más de...
Later on, we will talk about the style of your writing and how you are evolving. Now there are longer books. I think lines now are longer than they used to be. Is it so? Let's go back to the historical part of it. I wanted to ask you if those fascist groups and those fascist trends in the States did have, in those years, in 1942, 41, beginning, Second World War, did they have any chance to have a strong political presence in the States? Did they ever?
Always fringe movements. America First, the German-American Bund, the Ku Klux Klan, the Silver Shirts. They were a minute proportion of the American body politic. But let's not also forget, as well as the lunatic right, the comunista putas of the late 1930s and early 1940s, at the time when Stalin was murdering tens of millions. And the overriding conspiracy at the heart of my great new book, Esta Tormenta, is a conspiracy staffed by puta comunistas, puta fascistas, because they realize that sooner or later the democratic West will win the war.
Pero en la policía había más fascistas que...
There were more fascists in the police than communists, I think.
All the fucking politics and harping on the fucking fascistas at the expense of the comunistas. There were a minute proportion of fascist LA cops in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you, but I can see where this whole interview is going. Yeah.
No, yo es que pensaba que el fascismo...
No, I thought that fascism was playing a very important role in this book. Well, if we look at the cover.
Tried to get my American publisher to do a symbol that incorporated comunista, the hammer and sickle, fascista, the swastika, and I was told that nobody would recognize it because, as you know, later in the book, there is a drawing that incorporates comunista, fascista.
Bueno, uno de los planteamientos generales de la novela negra.
I think in the crime books, in the plots, we see that they're not like good people or evil people. Is that the case in your books too?
No, there are good people, and the cops are the good people. Whatever you think of them, these are the good people. Elmer Jackson, the renegade redneck from Wisharts, South Carolina. That's one good guy. William H. Parker, a real-life character, who would ultimately go on to become the greatest American policeman of the 20th century. He cannot abide, even though it derails his career, the execution of a lunatic Japanese named Fujio Shudo, a.k.a. the werewolf, for a series of crimes that he did not commit. He puts aside his personal ambition to do the right thing. Hideo Ishida, the tortured Japanese-American homosexual criminologist who will do anything to avoid the Japanese internment, that grave American injustice. Kay Lake, a noble young woman, and Joan Conville, a tortured woman who stands in, why mince words, audience, for my mother, who was tragically murdered in 1958. They're the good guys, and the fascistas, the comunistas, the bad fifth columnists in Mexico and the United States are the bad guys.
En términos generales, las mujeres aparecen.
In general terms, women are the good ones, are the good characters in your books. They're attractive not only from a physical point of view, but also given their personalities. You've mentioned John and Claire. They are two positive characters, are they not?
Character. She's a dope fiend. She's a comunista dilettante. And I don't dig her. I created her, so I kind of dig her, but I don't really dig her like I dig Kay and John. She's not one of the heroes. She just barely survives the book, which is not giving a lot away to you folks because she appears in my much earlier written but latter set book, The Big Nowhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they're positive characters. Ishida is a positive character. Elmer Jackson, Thad Brown, Whiskey Bill Parker. Yeah, great people all. Tortured, deep, rich, passionate. Yeah.
¿Qué lugar tiene la descripción de la violencia en sus novelas? La descripción.
Do you make brutal descriptions in your novels as well?
Short descriptions of violence. Also, I don't describe sexuality as going on too terribly long. I'm going for the key detail always. The ugliness of the violence, the tenderness of the sexuality, you're in and you're out in 2 paragraphs. Don't blink or you're going to miss something. The art of crime fiction is largely the art of expositing the key detail in the cleanest language possible. And often, it's an exercise in brevity. What is the quickest way and the pithiest way between 2 narrative points? I never explain a forensic procedure when my heroic Japanese-American criminalist Hideo Ishida is engaged in a procedure with fingerprints or with spraying for luminol. I only do a direct action description because to stop and go out of Ishida's viewpoint to spend a page describing the procedure itself slows it down to a dead crawl. And this goes back to your comment of the Falange, Franco, Guernica, the Condor Legion, all of it. I can go into more physical description, or I can put in historical detail.
¿Cómo está cambiando?
How is your style changing? Because I've been told that you're moving from very, very short lines to longer paragraphs. Why is it so, if you're doing so?
Style of my two previous books, Blood's a Rover and Perfidia, now in Esta Tormenta, is to spotlight the internal lives of my characters. Because Elmer Jackson, Hideo Ishida, Joan Conville, Kay Lake, Dudley Smith, they're uncommonly brilliant and thoughtful people. You have to tell the reader what these people are thinking. And about this great and horrific time in world history and American history. What do they think of it all? What do they feel about it all? And you can't do that with a hyper-abbreviated style.
Bueno, hablemos de Los Ángeles, que ha sido uno de su lugar.
Let's talk about LA, your favorite location to write novels. Specifically, you are now talking about 1942, Second World War. From a literary point of view, what is most attractive to you so that you located in those years in that city and in that year?
Past, and I've always loved history, and I've always looked back. I was born in 1948, 6 years after the events of this book transpired, and I always had my kid's snout stuck in a magazine looking at a picture about World War II or the post-war era, or the atom bomb, or the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. All of it are criminal investigating committees, great criminal trials, and this is where I live. I don't have a computer or a cell phone. I don't read contemporarily set books. I'm always back in the past. And so I've developed a language of the past. I've developed a style of the past. I've developed a way to depict violent events of the past in the place where I grew up, LA. And if I grew up in Basque Country or, here in Bilbao or anywhere in Spain, well, I'd be somebody else. I'd be writing in Spanish. But I would write about this country in my most immediate locale. It's the era, it's the place of my early cognizance. So I'm going to be on it like a rabid dog.
Pero de hecho, le quería preguntar también por la Segunda Guerra Mundial en Los Ángeles.
I wanted to ask you about the Second World War in California. There were many Oriental people living there. There's a large population of Orientals, and you also deal with that. Could you comment on that, please?
The great shame of the Japanese internment of late 1941 into 1943, because in 1943, the men, at least, were offered the option of leaving the internment camps to join the American Army. Many of them took that option and acquitted themselves very bravely. The Japanese reign of terror in the Pacific and in Asia that preceded Pearl Harbor, particularly the incursions against China, the rape of Nanking in particular, well, it got the Chinese hating the Japanese quite a good deal, and it's not hard to see why. So in Los Angeles, Little Tokyo and Chinatown adjoin each other. They are one contiguous series of blocks, south to north, less than 2/3 of 1 mile long. So it's a recipe for disaster. But there were no murders in the time of Pearl Harbor. There was a Korean man who heard a Filipino man who heard an anti-Japanese song on the radio, and he went out and he shot what he thought was a Japanese man making a phone call in a pay phone booth the month of Pearl Harbor, but he made a big mistake because he wasn't a Japanese man, he was a Chinese man. And that's the ultimate metaphor, I think, for racial madness.
O sea, que me está diciendo que no tenían relaciones, digamos.
So there was not like a violent relationship in between between Chinese and Japanese people before Pearl Harbor. They didn't get along, but it was not like violent. Am I right to understand that?
Intermittently violent, but very little of it can be attributed to specific Japanese incursions against the Chinese over in Asia.
Yeah.
And so if you see in this book some made-up racial violence, Japanese, Chinese, whatever it is, it's safe to assume that I made it up because it's fiction.
Eva. Me ha dicho que lee sobre todo.
So you basically read history books. You don't read crime books written by your colleagues or the classics of the crime books?
No, basically I make it up. I hire researchers who compile fact sheets and chronologies for me so that I won't write myself into egregious error. But I'm not looking for any specific hidden document, CIA document, anything like that. I'm looking for the spark point where I can fictionally extrapolate. For example, I read some material on Baja California, the Mexican State Police, U.S. Army intelligence, and they mention a character, a Japanese naval attaché named Kyoho Hanamaka, who we were talking about before the event here. And he disappeared in Baja California from his home in Ensenada on December 18th, 1941, 11 days after the Pearl Harbor attack. Well, he's a big character in this book. So here's a preview for the people here in Bilbao. I made it up. All I saw, Kyoho Hanamaka disappeared, Ensenada, Baja California, 11 days after Pearl Harbor. Light bulb went on in my head. There you go.
No, le preguntaba si además de.
Apart from history books, do you also read crime books? Do you have any favorite writers? Or do you read any of the classical writers that you like better?
All I read is detective novels. It's basically all I've read in my lifetime. I mean, you want to torture me to death, make me read a William Faulkner book, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Cormac McCarthy, any of these guys. Particularly Cormac McCarthy and William Faulkner, because they don't use quotation marks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put all that aside. All I've read is crime novels, detective novels, a couple of political biographies, some true crime books. I love a good police novel. I love a good police television show. I love a good police movie. I love a good detective novel. And I love a good popular novel, like the cheesy, sex-saturated potboilers of Harold Robbins and Irving Wallace. And I'm not being disingenuous here. If you put me on a desert island with the great classics, the Spanish classic, Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes, or the great Shakespeare's, the great, Latin, South American, magical realism books, classic early 20th century American social justice novels, or a bunch of righteous, sex-saturated potboilers or private eye books. I want the private eye books and the sex-saturated pop novels. Because the great Irish-American writer Franco said, a literature that cannot be vulgarized is no literature at all and will not last. And I think the great vulgarization of the American arts comes to rest in two great popular art forms that Americans do better than anyone else: crime fiction and jazz. Yeah!
No hemos hablado del jazz, que también tiene una...
We've not mentioned jazz yet, which plays an important role in your book. It is there, then it disappears. We've got different musicians that are mentioned. What do you like most about jazz? Why did you want it to be part of this book specifically?
Uniquely indigenous to LA in 1942. The big bands were just going off, very earliest, into the subversive language of bebop, which is the form of jazz that I like and admire the most. And it gave me the opportunity to show a fascista, comunista meeting place where comunistas and whacked out very Catholics, anarchistas, and all kinds of nefarious criminal human beings possessed of dubious politics are hanging out in a rainbow coalition of whites, blacks, Asians, Latins, and having a high old time because they put all their racial and their political divisions aside, because what they really love more than anything else is hard-charging American jazz.
Y la música en general, que es lo que les une, ¿no?
Yes, it is pop.
And music in general, that sort of make them be together.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of the popular novel, popular music, and the sex-saturated books of the great Harold Robbins and the great Irving Wallace.
Pero luego, de hecho, el jazz se ha convertido en...
Then jazz turns into a very intellectual music, like part of the crime book. So even you have great followers about, among intellectuals. I don't know whether you like this or not.
But I like anybody who likes my books. And I like meeting the readers all the way around the world and talking to them, because more than journalists, certainly more than professional critics or academics, they'll get right up in your face and tell you, well, why on page 389 of Perfidia did Hideo Ishida do this? Or a young guy, a 17, 18-year-old kid in high school, will say, Kay Lake is my woman. And I said, well, you know what, in your dreams, brother. But I have to tell you, she turns 100 years old this year, or next year, in 2020. So you like a 99-year-old woman, God bless you. And that's the stuff that I live for. That's the equivalent to me of popular fiction, of jazz, of the crime novels I read as a kid.
¿Escucha ahora música popular de...
Do you now listen to current pop music?
I listen to bebop. I listen to classical music. I love chamber music. I love the Romantic composers. I'm obsessed with Beethoven. I got pictures of Beethoven and busts of Beethoven all over my pad. I love early bebop, late bebop. I love the modern jazz quartet and Coltrane and Bird. And I love Duke Ellington passionately. Yeah. I love Stravinsky. I love Bartók. I love Shostakovich. I love the romantics into the moderns.
Le tengo que preguntar por Los Ángeles otra vez.
Let's go back to LA. How long have you been living away from LA?
38 years. I have spent 29 of them in either New York, Connecticut, Kansas City, Kansas, San Francisco, Carmel on the California coast, or LA. So only 9 of the past 38 years have I lived in LA. It's where I go when women divorce me. Yeah.
No, perfectamente entendible. Le quería preguntar si Los Ángeles, visto desde la distancia, si se escribe mejor sobre eso.
Do you think when you look at LA from a distance, do you then write better about LA precisely?
I don't. I can write about LA where I happen to find myself. And I've written most of the LA Quartet, Underworld, USA trilogy, and second LA Quartet books outside of Los Angeles.
Ya, eso es lo que le quería preguntar. Yo creo que vamos a abrir ya el turno de las...
I think we're going to start with the audience. So we're going to give them a microphone so they can make questions for you.
I'll talk about anything pertaining to, the world that I create. I don't want to talk about American politics. I don't talk about President Trump. I don't talk about the current day. I don't pay attention to it. My mind, my soul, my body is stuck back in 1942. So nothing exists post-1942. Yeah.
Había una pregunta, ¿no? Sí.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Ellroy.
Hey, sir. How are you?
And thanks to both of you. I think you have been splendid.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, or better to give some feedback on the experience that you had taking your novel into the cinema, LA Confidential, and what are the cons, the pros that you felt afterwards, and would you do it again?
Well, I'll always do it again because money is the gift that no one ever returns. And so anyone that is paid movie option money or buyout movie for a book that they've written should know that the odds are 1,000 to 1 that it will ever be made. And if it is made, it will stink. Malo, malo, malo. That said, the check for LA Confidential, the financial check, it cleared. I made some money. It financed my first divorce. I don't think it's in any way a good movie. I think it's about as deep as a tortilla. I don't like the performances. Russell Crowe, malo. Kim Basinger, malo. Kevin Spacey, malo. Guy Pearce, James Cromwell, malo. Danny DeVito, Reba, he's very short. James Cromwell's very tall, yeah. So there you go. But they also made a movie out of my book, The Black Dahlia, which was very poorly received, where LA Confidential was very well received. And the Black Dahlia movie sold 50 times as many books for me in 7 weeks than LA Confidential did in 22 years. So figure that one out. But remember, money is the gift that no one ever returns. Dinero, dinero, dinero. Okay. Yeah.
I think you have to try the Spanish tortilla. Maybe you like it better.
It better be thicker than the LA Confidential, American tortilla, which is about like that. Yeah. Thin movie.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Una pregunta ahí.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for all your work. That I think is some of the most interesting stories, thriller stories of the last years.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask you if you will share with us about the process of your writing process. Do you start with the whole structure in your mind, or you start with an idea and it grows along the process? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, sir, the idea is always history, and I write books in series. And I have ideas that combine the personal stories of my fictional characters with the personal stories of my non-fictional, real-life characters, and the history itself. And I take notes, maybe 200 pages of notes. And then I write a 500-page outline wherein I detail all of the action that has to transpire in the book down to the most minute detail. I have it typed up. My American publisher, English language, reads it. They offer comments. I go home and I write the book. So knowing that the book is massively detailed, densely complex, rich in historical detail, I can live, having this superstructure, in the improvisational qualities of the individual scenes. So the overall structure is logically inviolate, and the immediate scenes pop off the page. And then I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until it's perfect down to the word. And I write by hand because I've never used a computer for anything. That's how I do it. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Have you got ideas or new ideas for your next novel? Or have you started writing your next novel?
Yeah, I'm putting the ideas together. It's the third book in this series. Yeah.
And what will it be the title?
I don't know yet.
¿Queréis hacer alguna pregunta más? ¿Sí?
How much time did you dedicate to writing this last book?
Hey, I know who you are. Your mom told me about you. Okay, 3 years. 3 years. A lot of thought. A lot of ideas. A lot of notes on the history, the plot, the love stories, the politics, the World War II background, the Falange, the Spanish Civil War, Weimar Berlin with the Comunistas and Fascistas battling in the streets in the late 1920s and early 1930s. A real-life fire in Griffith Park in Los Angeles that happened on October 3rd, 1933. and it killed 34 men clearing brush in the park to build a golf course. A fictional gold robbery off a train. The presence of Pacific thunderstorms starting north of Los Angeles and coming all the way down the Mexican coast, Baja California. The Japanese internment in California, the Japanese internment in Baja California as implemented by Army intelligence and the Mexican state police. All of it, a lot of thought, 3 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Buenas tardes. Oye.
Good afternoon. I have a question. You've said that you read many police books. Who is the author that you see is the author to read in that genre?
What we might call the police novel. Not the police procedural novel. It would be the great Joseph Wambaugh, who's a Los Angeles policeman turned novelist. His early books, The New Centurions, The Blue Knight, The Onion Field, The Choir Boys. The masters of the police procedural novel, which is a form of the detective novel, and a much more realistic form than the private eye novel, would be Ed McBain, who wrote the 87th Precinct books, between, astonishingly, 1956 and 2005, and Hilary Waugh, Hilary, a man's name in this case, who wrote 15 police procedural novels about a police chief in small town Connecticut, the States, and also a New York Police Department homicide detective. These, to me, are the masters of the genre.
Mr. Ellroy, I hope you excuse my second ask.
No, go ahead.
I can't miss this opportunity. I get the idea that at the beginning you suffer when you wrote your first novel because of a kind of personal implication in it. If it was this way, is it was so? And if so, when you stop suffering while writing?
I don't suffer. I love this shit. I mean, they pay me to do it. And here I am. I'm a visitor in your great country. I love to write. Are you talking about my first novel, Brown's Requiem? Or what book are you talking about?
Kind of the inclusion of some personal experiences in your first novels.
Well, yeah, I mean, alcoholism, certainly, but then I got sober, so it's got a happy ending. I'm not much of a suffering guy. I dig life. I'm having a blast. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been depressed in my life. I've been anxious, certainly, but not fearful, angry, but never depressed. Now that's Dostoevsky. And Dostoevsky, he suffered. And Joyce Carol Oates has called me the American Dostoevsky, which is a hell of a compliment. But I've never read Dostoevsky, so I'm not quite sure of that. But I think Dostoevsky is really the Russian Ellroy. Yeah. Yeah. He suffered, man. Yo soy el tigre. Yo soy el perro.
Hay una pregunta aquí también.
Lo primero,
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your work. I really enjoy your books. I'd like to know whether in your coming books are you intending to show some characters like Kemper Boy, Big Bug to God, Little. Is it feasible that they will show up in your next books?
Let's see. Okay, great. There it is. Ward Littell is in my novel Perfidia, the first book in this new series. Well, the first thing I had to do when I conceived the second LA Quartet is go back and chart the physical descriptions and the ages of the characters in my first two series of books, the LA Quartet, Underworld, USA trilogy. So Kemper Boyd, Pete Bondurant, Jack Vincent, Ed Exley, Dave Klein, Bud White, they were too young to be policemen in 1942, or they were described as being off fighting World War II. So I can't use them. So that's something that I have kept a very tight rein on with these first two books.
Gracias. Mr. Ellroy, which one of your books was most difficult to write for you?
Perfidia, which is the preceding book, the first book in the second LA Quartet, because it's a massively big novel and it's told in real time. It's the continuous around-the-clock narrative. It's like a movie like High Noon, the Gary Cooper Western from 1952 that takes place, it's a 94-minute movie, and it takes place over 94 minutes. Perfidia depicts LA the month of the Pearl Harbor bombing, and it begins the day before the Pearl Harbor attack, December 6th, and it covers 23 days around the clock, consecutive chapters, 4 viewpoints, because people were terrified, because LA was under imminent threat of Japanese sea and air attack, and people were bombed out of their gourds. There were frenetic love affairs because everyone thought the world was going to blow up. There were also all-city blackouts in Los Angeles during that particular month, where all the external lights were doused so that potential Japanese aircraft could not see the buildings. If there was a blackout, it had to be absolutely accurate. So writing a book on a narrative clock as rigorous as this one, and telling all the criminal stories, the personal stories, the subsidiary real stories, the love affairs, it was a difficult piece of work.
Hola, buenas noches, gracias por venir.
Well, thanks for coming, Mr. Ellroy. In Perfidia, the daughter of Dudley Moore, I think, is the Black Dahlia, if I'm not mistaken.
Dudley Moore was this little guy, comedian, played the piano. Yeah.
En This Storm sale también.
Is this character also in This Storm?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. Hi. Hola.
Good evening, Mr. Ellroy.
Hola.
Hello. I'd like to know if you like reading when you were a boy, or when did you really knew you wanted to be a writer and you really thought it could be a career for you? Thank you.
You're welcome. Reading is a great, great love of mine.
Leer es uno de mis grandes amores, una de mis grandes pasiones. Mi padre me enseñó a leer. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my dad taught me to read when I was very young, and my snout has been stuck into the pages of a book for many, many decades now. And when I was 8, 9 years old, I realized I wanted to write novels. Yeah, it just took me a while to get around to it. I never finished high school. I've never taken a writing class. I just happened to have the talent. I believe the talent. Recently, the great American boxer, Errol Spence Jr., who will fight Showtime Sean Porter for the unified welterweight title on Saturday night. I'll be in a hotel in Madrid, so I won't get to see the fight shit. Every book tour carries a price. Well, Errol Spence said, look, talent comes from God, which I believe profoundly, and then skill you've got to develop. So I believe that God has given me a gift, and I have certainly worked hard to improve upon God's gift.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Sí.
At what point of the American history did you find it was not worthy thinking about or narrating about? When? What year do you think it's the...
The cutoff point for me is 1972. I just don't care. No instinct says, write me, write me, write me, write me. That's it. I follow my instincts. After I finished the first LA Quartet and the Underworld USA trilogy, which covered the immediate post-war era, 1946 to 1972, that was it. Back to World War II with characters from the first two bodies of work as significantly younger people. Thusly, I will have created a unified, novelistic, fictional history of LA, my hometown, America, my country, between 1941 and 1972, 31 years.
And I would be too daring to ask you the reasons behind that, if you feel free to.
I've never given it any thought. That's it. I knew I'm going back. When I have an instinct, I trust it. When I have an instinct this strong, I trust it absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Quizá una última pregunta.
Last question eventually. Or we call this a conference. Well, thank you very much for coming to listen to Mr. Ellroy.
It makes me feel relevant when I do the kid thing. Yeah. Oh.
Si quieren firme libros, aquí, sí. Ahí, fuera les firmará libros. Gracias. Eso es.